What if the greatest betrayal in your life wasn't committed by an ex, a fake friend, or a toxic coworker, but by you? Think about it deeply. Every single time you beg for someone's attention, tolerate blunt disrespect, chase external approval, or sacrifice your mental peace just to keep the people around you happy, you are silently abandoning yourself. Most people spend their entire lives on a desperate, frantic search for love. They look for it in romantic relationships, friendships, career milestones, social media notifications, and the fleeting opinions of complete strangers. They treat their own worth like an item up for auction, letting the world dictate the price. But thousands of years ago, the Stoics unlocked a profound truth that modern society has completely forgotten. The person you need most in this life is the one staring back at you in the mirror. When you finally learn to love that person, everything changes. You stop fearing rejection because you realize someone else's exit doesn't diminish your value. You stop begging for validation because your own approval becomes enough. You stop shrinking yourself to fit into other people's microscopic expectations, and suddenly the world loses its power to control you. This video is not an exploration of arrogance, vanity, or ego. It is a deep dive into the absolute necessity of self-respect, inner peace, and unwavering self-worth. If you stay until the very end, the final lesson will completely shatter the way you view yourself forever. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine a tragedy playing out in real time. Imagine spending your entire life carrying a priceless, irreplaceable treasure without ever realizing its actual value. You guard everyone else's happiness with your life. You fight tooth and nail for everyone else's dreams. You stay up late worrying about everyone else's opinions. Yet you systematically neglect, criticize, and ignore the only person who has been with you since the exact second you were born, yourself. This is the silent crisis of modern life. We live in a world where many people are experts at loving others, but complete amateurs at loving themselves. They know exactly how to comfort a friend who is hurting, offering endless grace, patience, and kindness. But the moment they themselves suffer, they transform into their own worst enemy. They criticize their flaws, compare their behind the scenes to everyone else's highlight reels, and judge their mistakes with extreme malice. They become harsher toward themselves than they would ever dare to be toward a complete stranger on the street. The Stoic philosophers observed this exact behavioral pattern in ancient Rome, proving that human nature hasn't changed. They understood that the fundamental quality of your life does not depend on your relationship with money, status, or external success. It depends entirely on the quality of your relationship with yourself. Why? Because no matter where you go, there you are. You can change cities, switch jobs, leave relationships, and delete your social media accounts, but you cannot escape your own mind. That is why learning to love yourself isn't some luxury or a weekend self-care trend. It is a baseline survival necessity. Many people completely resist the concept of self-love because they confuse it with raw selfishness. They think that valuing themselves means becoming narcissistic, cold, or indifferent to the needs of the world. The Stoics drew a sharp line between these two mindsets. Selfishness says, I am more important than everyone else, and the world must bend to my desires. Self-love, however, says, I am just as important as everyone else, and my peace cannot be traded for your comfort. There is an entire world of difference between those two statements. Consider Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor who sat at the absolute peak of the Western world. He had total control over one of the greatest empires in human history. He had access to unlimited wealth, infinite praise, and absolute power. Yet when you read his private journal, Meditations, you see a man constantly reminding himself that his worth did not come from the applause of the Senate, the obedience of his subjects, or external military victories. It came entirely from within, from living according to his values, practicing justice, and maintaining his internal character. Think about the weight of that reality. If one of the most powerful men in human history had to actively remind himself that external success is empty, why do millions of us hand our self-worth over to strangers every single day? We let a single negative comment ruin our morning. We let a lack of likes on a post make us feel invisible. We let a standard rejection destroy our confidence for months. When your self-worth depends on the unpredictable opinions of others, you aren't living. You are operating as a psychological prisoner, waiting for your captors to give you permission to feel good. The Stoics wanted real freedom, the kind of freedom that only arrives when your value is no longer up for public debate. Let's look honestly at the ledger of your life. Ask yourself right now, how many major decisions have you made simply because you wanted people to like you? How many times have you stayed completely silent in a room when you wanted to speak, purely because you feared the judgment of people you don't even respect? How many career opportunities, creative projects, or personal dreams have you missed out on because you doubted your own ability? How many countless nights have you spent tossing and turning, overthinking a clumsy sentence you said to someone who probably forgot about it 5 minutes later? Now ask the follow-up question, has any of that exhausting performance ever brought you true, lasting peace? The answer is a resounding no. It leaves you feeling empty, fragmented, and tired down to your bones. Peace begins the exact moment you stop looking for your worth in places where it was never meant to be found. You cannot fish for self-worth in the shallow pond of external approval. The Stoics believed that every single human being possesses an internal spark that is entirely sacred. It is your character, your reason, your ability to choose, and your capacity to act with virtue. Rejection cannot touch this spark. Heartbreak cannot dim it. Failure cannot crush it. Criticism cannot alter it. The only way it loses its light is if you willingly surrender it to the outside world. When you finally grasp this concept, an extraordinary shift happens in your psyche. You stop chasing, you stop proving, you stop over-explaining yourself to people who are completely committed to misunderstanding you. You realize that you don't need to beg for a seat at tables where your presence isn't respected because you carry your own value with you. To fully visualize this, imagine a flawless, high-carat diamond dropped directly into the thick mud. Does that diamond suddenly become less valuable just because it is covered in dirt? Does its atomic structure change? Does its intrinsic worth drop to zero? Absolutely not. Its value remains completely unchanged, waiting to be wiped clean. The mud is irrelevant to the nature of the diamond. In the exact same way, your fundamental human worth does not decrease just because someone fails to see it. The problem is never your actual value. The problem is their limited perception. Much of our emotional suffering comes from forgetting this basic truth. When someone breaks up with us, ignores our texts, or passes us over for a promotion, our brains immediately jump to a toxic conclusion. Something must be wrong with me. I am not enough. But Stoicism offers a radically different, liberating perspective. Other people's actions do not reveal your worth. They reveal their own character, their own limitations, and their own worldview. Someone's inability to appreciate your presence does not make you less valuable, just like a blind person's inability to see the sun doesn't mean the sun has stopped shining. Their decision to walk away from you does not diminish your importance. It is simply a reflection of their path, not a judgment on your existence. When you tie your emotional stability to how others treat you, you are choosing emotional slavery. Self-love is the act of breaking those chains and keeping your value firmly in your own hands. True self-love cannot exist without self-respect, and self-respect requires drawing clear, unyielding lines in the sand. It means flatly refusing to tolerate behaviors, environments, or relationships that systematically destroy your inner peace. It means learning to say no as a complete sentence, without adding a mountain of defensive apologies. It means having the courage to walk away from dynamics that drain your spirit, no matter how long you've invested in them. A lot of people are absolutely terrified of setting boundaries because they operate under the scarcity mindset. They worry that if they stand up for themselves, they will push people away and end up completely isolated. But here is the reality check. Healthy boundaries do not push away the right people. They only reveal with crystal clarity the wrong people. The people who get angry, manipulative, or offended when you finally start setting boundaries are the exact people who were actively benefiting from your lack of them. They liked you better when you were easy to walk over, easy to use, and easy to silence. Their discomfort with your sudden self-respect is not your emotional burden to carry. Your sole responsibility in this life is to govern your own mind and protect your inner peace. The Stoics frequently compared the human mind to a fortress, not a fortress built of cold stone and iron bars, but a fortress built out of wisdom, clarity, and reason. Within that fortress lives your dignity. Not every random opinion deserves entry into your fortress. Not every criticism deserves an audience. Not every person deserves unlimited access to your mental energy. Guarding the gates isn't selfish, it's the highest form of sanity. One of the most potent acts of self-love is learning to actively enjoy your own company. We live in a society that is deeply terrified of being alone. People constantly keep the TV running in the background, scroll mindlessly through feeds the second they have a quiet moment, or jump from one unfulfilling relationship to another. They do this not because solitude itself is physically painful, but because silence acts as a mirror. Silence reveals the raw, uncomfortable truths they have spent years avoiding. The Stoics didn't just tolerate solitude, they actively cherished it. They recognized that in the quiet spaces of life, away from the noise, the performance, the social masks, and the constant demand for approval, you finally discover who you actually are. When you build a home within yourself and become genuinely comfortable being alone, a massive power shift occurs. You completely stop needing people to fill an empty void. And the moment you stop needing people out of desperation, you unlock the ability to choose them out of freedom. There is an ocean of difference between wanting someone in your life and needing them to survive. Need is rooted in deep anxiety and desperation. It whispers, "Please don't leave me, because if you go, my identity goes with you." Want, however, is rooted in strength and autonomy. It says, "I deeply value your presence, I love our connection, but I will be completely okay if our paths diverge." That single mental shift changes your entire aura. True confidence is not walking into a room assuming everyone is going to love you and stay forever. True confidence is walking into that room knowing that you will survive, rebuild, and flourish, even if they all walk out. It is trusting yourself enough to handle heartbreak, navigate loss, and stand completely on your own 2 feet when the storms of life hit. The ancient Stoics were not academic ivory tower philosophers. They were real people who faced extreme human trials. They dealt with brutal wars, sudden political exile, devastating betrayals, chronic illness, and the harsh reality of death. Yet they remained completely unshakable, because they understood that true strength cannot be imported from external circumstances, relationships, or material possessions. It must be manufactured entirely from within. If you have spent the last several years of your life trapped in deep self-doubt, feeling chronically unworthy or left behind, it is almost certainly because you are addicted to the toxic habit of comparison. And make no mistake, comparison is the absolute executioner of self-love. The exact millisecond you compare your unique personal journey to someone else's, you instantly blind yourself to your own value. We live in a digital age where everyone is running a highly sophisticated public relations campaign for their lives. You are looking at their edited, polished, curated highlight reels, the vacations, the promotions, the happy couple photos, and you are comparing it to your messy, unedited, behind-the-scenes reality. It is a completely rigged game. Everyone is fighting silent battles you know absolutely nothing about. Everyone has deep-seated insecurities. Everyone experiences crushing pain behind closed doors. Stop measuring your worth against the artificial standards of an edited world. Your path is entirely unique. Your struggles are specific to your growth. Your timeline cannot be measured by someone else's clock. The Stoics never wasted time asking, "Am I better than my peers?" They looked inward and asked, "Am I a wiser, more disciplined version of who I was yesterday?" That is the only metric that matters. Let's dismantle another massive barrier to self-love: the toxic demand for personal perfection. Perfection is a psychological mirage. It does not exist, and chasing it will leave you permanently miserable. Self-love does not require you to be a flawless human being who never stumbles. It requires radical self-acceptance. Now, let's be entirely clear here. Acceptance does not mean complacency. It doesn't mean sitting on the couch, refusing to grow, and saying, "This is just how I am." True acceptance means recognizing your fundamental humanity. It means understanding that you will make mistakes, you will fail at goals, you will occasionally disappoint yourself, and you will always have areas of weakness. That isn't a sign that you are fundamentally broken. It is simply proof that you are human. The Stoics viewed mistakes not as permanent stains on your character, but as essential, raw data for future wisdom. Every setback is a teacher, every failure is a diagnostic tool, and every challenge reveals a layer of hidden resilience you didn't know you possessed. Stop retroactively punishing yourself for not knowing then what you know now. Treat yourself with the exact same gentle compassion, patience, and understanding that you would instantly extend to a best friend or a child who made a mistake. Think about the internal monologue that runs through your head all day long. The voice you hear most in this life isn't your boss, your partner, or your parents. It is your own internal narrator. If that voice is constantly bullying you, insulting your intelligence, and tearing down your appearance, you are living with an enemy in your own head. It is time to fire the critic and hire an ally. As we navigate deeper into this philosophy, we have to look at how self-love is actually sustained over time. It isn't built through superficial affirmations whispered into a mirror once a week. It isn't built through temporary luxuries or quick bursts of motivation. True self-love is rooted in self-trust, and self-trust can only be earned through consistent, disciplined action. Think about how human relationships work. If you have a friend who constantly makes plans with you and cancels at the absolute last minute over and over again, do you trust them? No. If they promise to help you move and then turn off their phone on the day of the move, do you rely on them? Of course not. Their constant broken promises destroy their credibility in your eyes. Now look at the promises you make to yourself. Every single time you tell yourself, I am going to wake up early tomorrow and work on my goals, and then hit snooze 5 times, you break a promise. Every time you tell yourself, I am going to set a firm boundary the next time this person disrespects me, and then remain completely silent out of fear, you break a promise. Every time you choose short-term comfort over long-term growth, you run a knife through your own credibility. Slowly, over months and years, your mind stops trusting your word. This is the hidden root of low self-esteem. It's not that you lack inherent value, it's that you have built a track record of letting yourself down. Self-love requires you to show up for yourself. Every single time you honor your word, keep a commitment to your health, or choose discipline over a cheap excuse, you cast a vote for a stronger, more resilient version of yourself. Confidence isn't a feeling you wait for. It is a reputation you build with your own character. One of the most dangerous psychological traps of the modern era is what we can call the hero myth. Millions of people spend years, sometimes decades, sitting by the window of their lives, waiting for someone else to arrive and save them. They tell themselves a romantic fiction. If I can just find the perfect partner, they will heal my childhood wounds. If I can just get the right mentor, they will give me permission to be successful. If someone loves me enough, I will finally feel complete. But if you brought that perspective to a Stoic philosopher like Epictetus, he would look at you with deep confusion and ask a piercing question. Why are you waiting for a complete stranger to give you what you have the power to give yourself right now? Why are you begging the outside world for permission to matter? Why are you putting the keys to your emotional well-being into someone else's pocket? Here is the cold, liberating truth that modern society tries to hide. No one is coming to rescue you. No one is going to climb down into the trenches of your mind and fix your insecurities for you. And while that realization might feel incredibly harsh at first glance, it is actually the most magnificent news you will ever hear. Why? Because if your salvation depends on someone else coming to save you, you are entirely at their mercy. But if no one is coming, it means your happiness, your mental peace, your personal growth, and your ultimate destiny are completely in your own hands. You become the author of your own story. If someone leaves your life, you survive because they weren't your foundation. If someone misjudges you, you stand tall because their opinion didn't build you, so it can't break you. You become like an ancient tree with deep, massive roots. The external storms of life will shake your branches, wind will tear at your leaves, but they cannot tip you over because your anchor is entirely internal. Let's talk about the absolute destroyer of modern mental health, the endless chase for digital validation. Social media has taken our natural human desire for connection and amplified it into a full-blown psychological addiction. People are literally measuring their worth as human beings by the number of likes, followers, views, shares, and comments they receive from people they wouldn't even have a conversation with in real life. But let's get very clear about definitions here. Attention is not the same thing as love. Popularity is not the same thing as worth. External recognition has absolutely nothing to do with your identity. The Stoics would constantly remind us that public praise is a fickle, terrifyingly unstable currency. One day the crowd is cheering your name and throwing flowers at your feet. The very next day, the exact same crowd will completely forget you exist or turn on you with pitchforks. If you build your house on the foundation of public applause, you condemn yourself to a lifetime of performing. You will spend every waking second always adjusting your personality, always proving your status, always pretending to be happy, always wearing a mask, and never, ever resting. You will live in constant terror of being exposed or disliked. But the second your worth comes from within, you resign from the theater. You no longer need the crowd's approval. You no longer need a digital committee to vote on your value. You simply allow yourself to exist completely without apology, without fear, and without shame. The world pays a premium for conformity, but your soul pays the price in exhaustion. Think about how draining it is to pretend to be someone you aren't just to be accepted. Self-love is the act of dropping the mask and letting the chips fall where they may. We hear a lot of talk about the fear of losing people. People say, "I'm so afraid my partner will leave me," or "I'm terrified my friends will abandon me." But almost no one ever stops to calculate the devastating long-term cost of losing themselves. What actually happens to your psyche when you spend 10, 20, or 30 years systematically abandoning your own dreams to keep the peace? What happens when you bury your authentic opinions because you don't want to cause a scene? What happens when you repeatedly choose everyone else's comfort over your own sanity? What happens is a slow, agonizing death of the spirit. It doesn't happen all at once in a massive explosion. It happens gradually, silently, one microscopic compromise at a time. One ignored boundary this week, one sacrificed passion project next month, one swallowed piece of truth next year. Until you wake up one morning, look squarely into the mirror, and realize you are living a life designed entirely by other people's expectations, and you have become a total stranger to the person looking back at you. This is why self-love is not a soft, gentle bubble bath concept. Self-love requires immense raw courage. It requires the terrifying courage to say no, even when it disappoints people you care about. It requires the courage to stand completely alone in a room when your values demand it. It requires the courage to let people misunderstand your boundaries without rushing to fix their feelings. Not everyone will cheer for your growth. In fact, the people who are actively benefiting from your old, people-pleasing identity will likely get very angry when you start valuing yourself. Let them. Their anger is a clear sign that your boundary was desperately needed. Your only true obligation in this short, finite life is to honor the truth of your own existence. The Stoics taught a brilliant framework for navigating reality, often called the dichotomy of control. They stated that the entirety of existence can be divided into two neat categories: things that are completely up to you and things that are not up to you at all. Other people's opinions, actions, text responses, judgments, and choices are completely outside of your control. On the other hand, your own thoughts, values, boundaries, character, and reactions are entirely within your control. The absolute root of almost all human anxiety and misery is the foolish attempt to control what is outside of us, while completely neglecting what is inside. Under your control are your thoughts, your boundaries, your daily habits, and your values and peace, which is where you must focus all of your energy. Out of your control are other people's thoughts, public opinion, past mistakes, and future outcomes, all of which you must let go of completely. When you base your self-esteem on whether or not people like you, you are trying to control an outcome you have zero power over. It is a recipe for madness. Every single morning when you wake up, Before you check your phone or interact with a single human soul, look at yourself and declare these internal truths. I do not need anyone's explicit permission to respect myself. I do not need a public vote of confidence to value my own mind. My worth as a human being is not a negotiation, and it is not up for debate based on public opinion. I am enough, not because I am perfect, not because I am wealthy, and not because everyone loves me, but because I am alive, and my existence possesses inherent, permanent value. Once that reality sinks deep into your subconscious, you stop navigating the world as a beggar looking for scraps of validation. You start standing tall, not because the world suddenly got easier or kinder, but because you built an internal foundation that no external storm can shake. Let's close this journey with a highly uncomfortable question that most people never dare to ask themselves, because the answer forces a massive reckoning. Think about this carefully. If you treated the people in your life, your friends, your partner, your family, the exact same way you treat yourself on a daily basis, would they stay in your life? If you constantly followed them around, pointing out every single flaw in their appearance, would they stay? If you reminded them of mistakes they made 5 years ago every single morning, would they stay? If you compared them to more successful people every time they sat down to rest, would they stick around? Absolutely not. They would pack their bags, call you abusive, and walk out of your life forever. Yet you inflict this exact psychological torture on yourself every day of the week, and then wonder why you struggle with anxiety and low self-esteem. A mind at permanent war with itself can never taste true peace. No amount of money can fix an internal war. No romantic partner can heal it. No high-status job can cure it. The problem is entirely internal, which means the solution must be internal. True self-love begins with radical self-forgiveness. You have to let go of the heavy, crushing stones of past regret and shame that you have been carrying around in your backpack for years. Replaying your old mistakes over and over again will not change the past. It only poisons your present. You cannot become the powerful person you are meant to be if you are permanently chained to the flawed person you used to be. Growth requires release. Healing requires you to put the stone down. The person who walks beside you through every single victory, every crushing heartbreak, every massive failure, and every beautiful triumph in this life is the person looking back at you in the mirror. Make that relationship a beautiful one. When you finally learn to love yourself more than anyone else, not through the shallow lens of ego, but through the deep fortress of wisdom, self-respect, and inner strength, you become truly complete. You become powerful. You become unstoppable. And that is the exact point where real peace begins.